Geordin Hill-Lewis joins us this morning to pick up on something which could become a magnet for companies in South Africa. Load shedding has been with us in this country for nearly 15 years now. And from everything we hear from Eskom, it's not going to end anytime soon. But you, as the mayoral candidate for Cape Town, are running on the platform of no more load shedding. You'll be completely invulnerable to whatever Eskom decides. Geordin, that's quite a big statement, given that every municipality in the country would love to do it, much less a huge metro like Cape Town. And I asked you if you could just tell me practically how you're going to achieve that. If we just start from, where will you get the electricity from if you can't get it from Eskom?
Thank you, Alec. It's really nice to be with you, and thanks for the invitation. I'm really glad that you asked me to talk about load shedding, because this is one of the things that I'm most excited about this and for Cape Town's future. You're absolutely right. My very first campaign that I fought in as a staff member, Helen's campaign, when she was running for mayor of Cape Town in '05, we had our very first load shedding, although the term wasn't introduced then. You'll remember Alec Irwin described it as a bolt in the generator in Coburg, but that was really the first rolling blackout that South Africa experienced, and that was November 2000. So, as you said,
it's more than 15,
more than 15 years ago. So there's a whole generation of kids who have grown up without knowing we won. I find it outrageous. I really do. I think standards where most people actually acceptable, that not so much acceptable, but just a kind of ordinary part of our lives that we have to put up with load shedding, even though it is technologically so possible that it's actually, I don't think it's an exaggeration to describe it as easy. It's easy to defeat load shedding because all of the technology, in fact, it was there 15 years ago. We are way behind the rest of the world on renewable energy. Cape Town is one of the sunniest places and one of the windiest places. And yet here we sit 15 years later, and hundreds of billions in expenditure and bailouts later still. So I'm absolutely committed to this. And I believe that technology is actually eminently doable using battery and pump storage. And the key thing is actually national government to do it, but also the regulatory changes that allow 400 megawatts in self-generation without a license. We've also got this kind of small for municipalities to start buying it. And I think that what Cape Town's got to do is very aggressively to kick open that door and start buying power independently from Eskom. And crucially, buying power on its own doesn't stop load shedding, but start buying storage capacity from independent providers, so that load shedding, you have the storage capacity to be able to offset that load shedding. And that's what Cape Town already does using the Steenbras Dam pump storage system. We already have essentially what is in the country, and that helps us to offset so that there is no load shedding in Cape Town when the rest of the country is on stage one. But what we really want to do is expand our storage capacity, both in-house by continuing to invest in Steenbras, but also from independent providers. Expand our storage and power capacity to make ourselves, my ambition, and I know that it is ambitious, but I'm absolutely committed to this, to make ourselves free from. Now, that's going to take some work over the next few years, but if we do, as you said at the beginning, what a boon that would be for Cape Town's economy as the only place in the country with reliable electricity.
I remember talking with your executive deputy mayor, who took us through the rates and taxes in Cape Town. More efficient governance has actually meant that your rates are now lower than anywhere else of the other metropoles. And I guess that's going to accelerate if you have more efficient governance. But just to unpack it from the beginning, how much power does Cape Town need? And is it feasible in that context that there are enough independent power producers out there that you could buy from instead of getting it from Eskom?
Look, I'm not talking about switching off Eskom. It uses about 2,000 megawatts at huge. It's a huge amount of power. We don't have to replace that in full. Remember, for every stage of load shedding, you've got to switch megawatts per stage. 100 megawatts, stage 2, 200 megawatts, and so on. What we need to do is to be able to replace that load shed portion, reduce our reliance on Eskom by that load shed portion so that we can protect consumers and residents from load shedding. And then over time, of course, you're right, over time, but that's a longer term vision. Reduce reliance on Eskom even beyond that so that we can bring prices down, because Eskom is now one of the most electricity when renewable energy is coming in at a fraction of the cost.
So what's your peak? What's your short-term ambition? How many hundreds of megawatts would you need so that if Eskom, I suppose, presumably if Eskom went to load shedding level 5, you'd need 500 megawatts?
We already have 100 megawatts from Steenbras, and I would, the most serious load shedding that we've had in the last year, I think, has been level 4. So if we can get up to 300 or even close to 400 megawatts additional capacity, then I think we can pretty much effectively say that Cape Town is free from all of the ordinary, or so-called ordinary, it's never ordinary, but what consider ordinary load shedding in South Africa. And if it gets worse than that, if it gets up to stage 5 or 6 or 7, as we've had once before, a couple of years ago, then that's going to take longer to get there. It's definitely going to take longer to get there. But if we can say to South Africans that stage 3 or 4, you will have nothing, then I think that would just be an amazing thing.
And there are enough independent power producers in the metropole or in the province that you can tap into?
Alec, let me tell you, in fact, I know that after this interview, it's going to happen again. I have a deluge of foreign investors, foreign governments, local investors contacting me every time I do an interview about this, saying, we are ready and waiting. We just need the regulatory approvals to get this done. All the technology is there. It is much cheaper than Eskom can ever provide. It's much cheaper than the city is currently paying. In fact, there's even concessional finance available. There are sloshes of money around the world available for renewable energy at very concessional rates. So raising the money is not a problem. The technology is not a problem. It is all politics in South Africa. And this is what I find so outrageous, that you and I and millions of other South Africans sit in darkness every evening because Minister Geordin Hill-Lewis refuses to speed this reform process along and introduce a truly competitive and open energy market and allow cities to buy from the lowest cost producer. And I just think that it's time enough for us to say, we actually are not going to accept this outrage of load shedding when all of the answers are so easy, just because of a kind of fossil fuel obsessed national minister refuses to usher in a competitive energy market. We'll move ahead and push that door open ourselves.
But what does the law say? Are you allowed to do that? To push? In fact, you said kick the door open earlier.
Yes. Well, so the door is slightly ajar in that we're allowed to now have 100 megawatts self-generation, and the law now says clearly that you're allowed to resell excess supply to third-party consumers. So I think that the only plausible interpretation of that is that municipalities are included in so-called resellers, that we can buy from third parties and sell to other consumers, to other third parties. And so that's, that is the future energy model for government, is to run the network grid. It's essentially a wheeling business. So we can slowly but surely get out of the business of simply buying expensive energy from Eskom and selling that expensive energy to consumers with a little bit of a markup to run our own grids. That business model is rapidly dying because every major consumer who can afford to is checking out of that system. They're investing in their own self-generation. So we better move to the new model quickly. Otherwise, it actually poses an existential threat to local government finance across the country.
I'm just thinking about this on those 100 megawatt or non-licensed abilities to put a plant up, and your need, you've already got 100 megawatt, your need is for at the max maybe another 5 of those 100 megawatt plants. Can you not contract independently, or are the people who are getting hold of you saying we want to put up bigger than or bigger plants than 100 megawatt? What would be stopping you from actually going into that model very quickly of having 5 or 6 of these providers?
Look, to my interpretation is that nothing is stopping us and that we should do so as quickly as we possibly can. But as I said, remember, it's not just about generating new power, because if you have, let's say, 100 megawatts of new power, that is removed from the national grid, but that doesn't stop load shedding. You've got to have a way of storing that power for when load shedding occurs. So the procurement of storage capacity is actually just as important as the procurement of independent power, which is why I heard in your introduction you were talking about the mayor of Johannesburg talking about, is it Kelvin Power Station?
Kelvin Power Station, yes.
Yes. So what I did not understand about the mayor's statement, I read it very carefully, and I'm not sure that the mayor properly understands the technicalities here, or if he does, maybe he just didn't say that, is that it's not good enough to simply buy 100 megawatts of power from Kelvin Power Station. That is not going to protect residents in Joburg from load shedding. You've got to have a way to store it. And that is really the key technological unlock that we've got to achieve to stop load shedding. But to answer your question, I don't think that there's any impediment. I don't think that there's any legal impediment. We've got to move quickly. I have no doubt that the National Minister, Mantashe, who is now, I strongly believe, the biggest handbrake on the South African economy, is Minister Geordin Mantashe. He should be removed from office as soon as possible to get a forward-thinking, future-focused minister, growth-oriented minister there. I think he will try to put more stumbling blocks in our way, and he's not going to be happy about it, but we've got to push that advantage. And as I said, we're going to kick it over.
If the ANC were to pass more legislation, in other words, reverse its view on the 100 megawatt, would you then go to the Constitutional Court? Are you that determined to kick open this door that's ajar? In other words, whatever's thrown at you, you're prepared to take it head on?
I'm absolutely determined on this. As I said to you, I regard this as, it's not just an inconvenience for South Africans to have to cook dinner in the dark. It is a massive, massive ball and chain on our national economy. It's holding us down. It's a huge deterrent to investor sentiment. Imagine trying to run a manufacturing business in this country where you've got municipal outages because of bad maintenance of municipal infrastructure. Then you've got 2 hours or 4 hours of Eskom outages. No wonder we are seeing such horrific declines in manufacturing employment in South Africa. It's impossible to run any kind of manufacturing business under these conditions, never mind all the other businesses. So South Africans need to get more angry about load shedding. It is not normal. It is not acceptable, particularly when all of the technological solutions are so easily there. This is a political and regulatory reason. That's the reason we have load shedding, and I find that totally unacceptable. I'm not going to stop pushing this, and even if it means we do have to take them on.